She sits in the courtroom like she owns the air around her. There's not a hint of panic in her eyes, not the slightest tremble in her hands. Instead, she wears a soft, almost amused smile, the kind someone gives when they believe they're already 3 steps ahead of everyone else. When the judge enters and the room rises, she adjusts her blazer with the calm of a woman who has studied this world from the inside. Years spent collecting evidence, photographing scenes of violence, sealing bags of fibers and blood. She knew the rhythm of investigations the way a musician knows a familiar melody, and she believed that knowledge made her untouchable to the jury. Her attorneys painted her as a loyal friend caught in the storm of someone else's chaos. They presented her as the steady hand guiding a spiraling woman through a divorce gone nuclear. A friend, a confidant, a former crime scene technician simply trying to help. They insisted there was nothing, no weapon, no trace, no proof, linking her to the death of the woman she once called family. And for a moment, that illusion held. But illusions don't survive long under the weight of truth. Across the room, prosecutors waited with a different story, one that began to unravel the moment they played a simple piece of surveillance footage. It wasn't dramatic. No confession, no confrontation, just a mundane clip from a hardware store. But the items on the counter told a darker story than any witness could. Concrete mix, potting soil, a shovel, purchased the morning after her friend vanished. The smile on her face vanished as the video played, as though the realization hit that her own expertise, the very skills she thought would shield her, had betrayed her. What the jury didn't know yet was that her training hadn't just failed her, it had trapped her. The victim was only 33, a former police officer who had survived far worse than a divorce, or so everyone believed. She vanished with no struggle, no witnesses, no immediate trail. But you don't need a dramatic scene when you have 2 feet of dirt on a quiet patch of land that happens to belong to the family of the woman now sitting so confidently in court. This was the story of how a crime scene expert tried to craft the perfect burial, and how the smallest overlooked detail would expose everything she thought would stay buried forever. The calm she carried into the courtroom wasn't born overnight. It was built slowly, brick by brick, in the days after her friend disappeared. While investigators scrambled, she watched them with the detached confidence of someone who believed she knew their every move before they made it. She had once worn the same gloves, carried the same kits, dusted the same rooms. She thought like them, worked like them, and assumed she could stay a step ahead simply because she had been one of them. That was her first mistake. The victim's family spoke to police with the kind of quiet fear that comes when a disappearance doesn't feel like a disappearance at all. There were no frantic messages, no sudden financial withdrawals, no signs of a meltdown or escape attempt. Felt clean, unnaturally clean, almost rehearsed. And as investigators dug deeper, another detail emerged. The victim had spoken of fear in the weeks prior. Fear of being watched, fear of being followed, fear of someone who should have been on her side. The missing person posters went up, more for formality than hope. Behind the scenes, detectives were already circling around someone they knew too well. She had inserted herself early, offering theories, advice, and even criticism of how the team was handling the search. It was subtle, but everyone noticed. A person grieving doesn't critique police procedure. A person hiding something often does. Then came the discovery in the yard. 2 feet of earth disturbed in a way that only someone trained would recognize. The soil had been turned, watered, patted, and disguised with fresh leaves. To an untrained eye, it looked like landscaping. To an experienced investigator, it looked like guilt. But it wasn't the burial site that first caught their full attention. It was the unnatural silence of the woman now on trial. She didn't cry during questioning. She didn't plead with the public for help. She didn't ask to see the victim's family. Instead, she waited, almost as if she expected the case to stagnate. Only it didn't. The first crack appeared when detectives pulled her phone records. Late-night searches, maps opened at odd hours, messages that were deleted but not erased. Technology doesn't care about confidence. It cares about patterns. And her patterns were becoming impossible to ignore. Slowly, inevitably, the image of a helpful friend began to dissolve, replaced by the shadow of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing, until the moment she didn't. The investigators watching the video feed scrubbed back and forth through the footage, trying to pinpoint the exact moment the comm cracked. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a small shift in her posture. A slight tightening at the corners of her eyes each time the judge mentioned words like custody, awaiting trial, or flight risk. She had walked in rehearsing the version of herself she believed would win sympathy. The naive girl led astray, the harmless teen caught in circumstances beyond her maturity. But the room wasn't reacting the way she expected. No one looked softened. No one looked convinced. The more the evidence was raised in court, the more her expression seemed to collapse inward, like she was trying desperately to hold a mask in place that no longer fit the shape of her face. When the prosecution replayed her messages, those late-night exchanges she thought she had deleted forever, a sense of dread washed across her features. It wasn't the content alone that destroyed her chances. It was the way they revealed who she had been when she thought no one was watching. The courtroom shifted in atmosphere. Even the defense attorneys leaned forward, suddenly wrestling with the sinking realization that the material was far worse than they'd prepared for. Her composure wobbled. At one point, she swallowed hard, blinked slowly, and then began tracing circles on her knee with her thumb. A nervous habit the investigators noted, one that only emerged when she felt cornered. But the turning point came when the judge paused, looked at her over the rim of his glasses, and said the decision was no longer simply about whether she was a danger to others. It was about whether she understood the gravity of what she'd done. His words hit her harder than any accusation so far. Something in her eyes flickered. Not guilt, not denial, but shock. Shock that her age wasn't shielding her. Shock that adults in the room saw not a frightened girl but someone capable of deliberate harm. She shifted slightly, as though searching for an exit that didn't exist. Her breathing became shallow. She wrapped her arms around herself like she was suddenly cold. The audience behind her stirred, sensing this unraveling, whispering among themselves as the tension thickened. One of the deputies stepped closer, noticing her trembling hands. She wasn't crying, not yet, but she was on the edge, that fragile, silent edge where panic builds in the throat, waiting for permission to break through. And then, as the prosecutor laid out the sequence of events, one piece clicking mechanically into the next, she seemed to realize for the first time that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't something her lawyers could spin into a lighter version of the truth. This was her life collapsing in real time, one sentence at a time. And no one was coming to save her. September 8th had started like any other morning in Pensacola, the humid warmth pressing down, making the streets shimmer. Taylor woke up with the weight of her divorce still heavy on her shoulders, tension threading through every movement. She had plans that day, small, contained, a meeting with a friend she trusted, a conversation about money, about responsibility. She didn't know, of course, that this trust would become a fatal mistake. When Ashley arrived at Taylor's house, she appeared relaxed, even cheerful. A smile, a greeting, the casual air of someone who belongs. Taylor got in the car, chatting briefly with Cassandra, her girlfriend, who had expected nothing more than a routine discussion. She waved, watched the vehicle roll away, and had no inkling this was the last time she'd see her friend alive. The morning stretched out in ordinary moments. Traffic lights, turns, stops at stores, conversations about things mundane and trivial. Everything seemed unremarkable, too ordinary, which is exactly how Ashley wanted it to look. But behind that calm exterior, a dangerous calculation was already underway. Ashley knew her finances were strained. The $34,000 Taylor had entrusted to her, meant to be a temporary safeguard, was gone. Bills, debts, and a failing family business had consumed it. The looming threat of exposure transformed a friendship into a trap. To Ashley, the solution was simple and, in her mind, methodical. By late morning, Taylor's phone went silent. A sudden, chilling quiet that Cassandra would later describe as unnatural. No texts, no calls, no check-ins. It was as if Taylor had vanished mid-breath. Cassandra's worry escalated as the day wore on. Messages left unanswered, calls ignored, the sense of dread growing with each passing hour. It wasn't in Taylor's nature to disappear without explanation. She was organized, cautious, deliberate. Her absence raised alarms immediately. Meanwhile, Ashley moved with a calm that belied the dark intent behind her actions. Phone records and later surveillance footage revealed the route she took. From town to a secluded family property, a place rarely visited, the perfect backdrop for a crime meticulously concealed. To the untrained eye, the day could have been ordinary, mundane even. To investigators, every timestamp, every ping, every stop on that map started to form a pattern. A pattern that didn't just suggest wrongdoing, it practically spelled it out. And yet, in the moment, no one could see the trap closing. Ashley's knowledge of forensics, her years as a crime scene technician, made her confident. Every precaution she took, every layer she thought would hide her actions, relied on expertise that, paradoxically, would become her undoing. What she didn't anticipate was that patience, persistence, and digital breadcrumbs rarely lie. Every step left a trace, and those traces would eventually tell a story far more damning than any courtroom dramatization. By the time investigators reached Ashley's family property weeks later, the search was methodical, almost surgical. The land stretched wide, a mix of pasture, dirt paths, and forgotten outbuildings, seemingly harmless, untouched. But the officers knew better. Cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, and patient observation guided their steps. Every inch of that rural landscape was scanned, every anomaly logged. And then, behind a fence line near old equipment, a dog froze. The earth there had been disturbed, subtly, deliberately. A thin layer of concrete and soil hinted at premeditation. A calculated attempt to bury more than just evidence. It was the burial of a life, of a person who trusted her implicitly. As the team carefully removed the surface layers, plastic wrappings revealed skeletal remains. A necklace, distinctive, familiar. It matched Taylor Wright's. Shock rippled through the room, a tangible weight. The missing person case had transformed into a homicide investigation in an instant. Forensic teams worked under floodlights, documenting meticulously, photographing every inch, preserving the integrity of the scene. Nothing was left to chance. The initial autopsy confirmed the chilling truth. A single gunshot to the back of the head, precise and fatal. The scene spoke volumes about the perpetrator's knowledge. Someone had prepared, calculated every detail, yet in that preparation left the crucial thread. A receipt from the day after Taylor disappeared, showing purchases of concrete mix, potting soil, and a shovel. The very materials used to conceal the crime. It was a moment of poetic irony. The expertise meant to solve crimes had become the blueprint for the murder. Financial records added context to the cold forensic data. The $34,000 Taylor had entrusted to Ashley wasn't where it was supposed to be. Every evasive text, every delay in returning the money now painted motive in stark, unignorable terms. Ashley's story unraveled further when investigators pieced together phone pings, mapping her movements from town to the secluded property and back. Surveillance cameras captured her casually stopping at gas stations, at bars, smiling with friends, exuding normalcy while hiding a secret no one could have imagined. Each piece of evidence, phone records, receipts, financial discrepancies, ballistic reports, built a mosaic of guilt. It wasn't the hasty mistake of a panicked criminal. It was calculated, deliberate, the work of someone who thought themselves untouchable because of years of training. But arrogance, they discovered, often leaves a trail. And detectives followed it step by step, each revelation leading closer to the truth. Be why now? The community was watching, disbelief hanging over Pensacola like a storm cloud. A former crime scene technician, someone trusted, someone who helped solve cases, was at the center of the investigation. The betrayal was not just of friendship. It was of every unspoken assumption about safety, trust, and professional integrity. When the trial finally began in September 2019, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Ashley MacArthur walked in composed, notes in hand, occasionally smiling at her defense team, projecting calm. But every witness, every piece of evidence gradually chipped away at that facade. Phone records placed her with Taylor until the moment her friend vanished. Receipts showed the calculated purchase of burial materials the next morning. Ballistic evidence connected the weapon to her. Financial records revealed motive. The mosaic of guilt, built piece by piece, was undeniable. Witnesses painted a portrait of Ashley far removed from the friendly, competent woman Taylor had trusted. Cassandra Waller described Taylor's growing anxiety, her repeated attempts to retrieve her money, the way her intuition had sensed something was off. Other testimonies hinted at a darker side of Ashley, moments of intent and malice that had gone unnoticed, buried beneath charm and professionalism. Even a friend from Ashley's past hinted at dangerous tendencies, long before the crime occurred. The courtroom felt the weight of each revelation. The defense attempted to dismantle the case, arguing reasonable doubt. They questioned the accuracy of phone data, suggested someone else could have accessed the property, challenged the ballistic analysis. They emphasized the circumstantial nature of much of the evidence. But the jury had seen too many threads converging too precisely. Expertise had become her undoing. Every step she had taken to cover her crime, her knowledge of forensics, her understanding of evidence, her attempt at the perfect burial, left traces investigators could follow. It was meticulous, cold, and damning. Closing arguments finished, and the jury retired. The courtroom waited, breath held, for the verdict. When they returned, the silence was deafening. Guilty of first-degree premeditated murder, the foreperson declared. The words hung in the air, final and immovable. Ashley remained still, unreadable, while Taylor's family wept quietly. The judge sentenced her to life in prison, with a mandatory minimum of 25 years. Every plan, every calculation, every attempt to outsmart justice had failed. Ashley MacArthur, once a crime scene technician trusted to uncover truth, now faced the full weight of the law for the crime she had committed. Her professional knowledge had been turned against her, every skill she had honed becoming the blueprint for her conviction. Taylor Wright's life, cut tragically short, became a cautionary tale of trust betrayed, of money and desperation transforming friendship into murder. The $34,000 was never recovered, but justice, painstakingly pursued, had been served in the quiet aftermath. As the courtroom emptied and life outside moved on, one truth remained undeniable. Expertise, arrogance, and betrayal can leave a trail that no one, not even a trained mind, can completely erase.